Okay.
All right, thank you very much for that promo message. We are joined this evening by Franca Muller Paz. Franca, this is an interesting guest, to say the least, for this podcast because it turns out that we know each other. I had a text message from a mutual friend of ours who will remain nameless, who said, hey, yeah, I know you like to do local politics stuff, and I was having a chat with a friend of mine who, is an educator as well as you are, and said, you should probably try to get this person on. It turns out we used to work for Ostrowski's famous Polish sausage.
Yes, there is a deep sausage connection here this evening.
Yes, Polish sausage, kielbasa, pickled green beans, and various other products.
Mhm.
When I was at the peak of my beef jerky powers, yeah, we were.
Smoked, non-smoked, all kinds of options. Italian,
Did
spicy,
you
non-spicy.
so were you ever involved in making the sausage, or did you just sell it?
I watched you make it with like your headphones in, jamming out, making
Yeah.
sausage, but I mostly just, grabbed it out of the like meat hanger or whatever, and then like threw it into the cooler and rocked out to the farmer's market. That was my link in the chain, so to speak.
So to speak. So I guess before we get to all of the meat and potatoes of this segment, how did you get involved in that?
So funny story. When I was in college, I had a million jobs at the same time, all the time, to just like be paying down, being able to go to Goucher College and to pay for all my stuff. And so one of the many jobs I had concurrently was working at initially a restaurant called Kiss Cafe as a waitress,
Oh.
which was really a drug front, is what I learned later, which I was like, why does the manager not care that there's no customers here ever? And so luckily one day, John, who the owner, of Bad Decisions, saw me just looking miserable because I wasn't going to get any tips that day because there were, two people in the restaurant as always. And so he, poached me and convinced me to come work at Bad Decisions.
Right.
So I bartended at Bad Decisions for a period of time, and then went off and taught in Philly for a couple years, and then came back, and I just had to get back in the game. And when John told me that he was selling sausage through Bad Decisions and Strowski's, I was like, I want a piece of that.
Yeah, that was a weird and wild time, to say the least, in terms of, what I guess everyone was going through. I mean, John's managing two businesses simultaneously, and, you've got 87 jobs in college. Woo!
And you're selling sausage to the NSA. It is a crazy world.
Well, I wasn't just selling sausage. It was also beef jerky that I was making.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's, oof. I don't want to relive that time in my life. But while we're at it, instead, okay, so that's an interesting jump off point because that's how we kind of know each other. But
Yeah.
you're here today because you are actually running for city council in Baltimore City, 12th district, which includes a large plot or section of land like in the middle of the city that, largely I think people don't really have it in their mind as like the downtown touristy area. It's actually like the guts and the heart of like the middle of the city.
Yeah,
And you are running on a Green Party ticket. Is that correct?
that is correct.
I'm super interested in this, but before we get to, that process, like what's your background? How did you arrive at this decision to come back to Baltimore and then eventually get involved in public service?
Sure. Well, so I'm an immigrant. I came here as a baby from Peru. And when I first
Mm.
came to the United States, I lived in a city called Paterson. It's a small factory city in New Jersey. And when we lived there, my dad was just getting started with his construction business, which, for anyone who's done construction can be really tough. You're making a lot of mistakes. And when you make mistakes in construction, it costs you a lot of money, not your clients. And so he was really concerned. Paterson has a really bad rap for schools. And so he was concerned about my ability to go to a school that he thought I would be safe in. And there were also some issues in the neighborhood, having some drug related violence issues. And so he really wanted to find a way for me to be able to, you know, be able to be at home and be in peace, and be at school and be at peace. And so my parents worked really hard, and through the help of a friend, were able to rent in a suburb only a few miles away, but it might as well have been another planet. It was a public school, but it was fully funded. It had everything. There were modern computers. You could take textbooks home. And with my family friends that had stayed back in Patterson, that was never the case. And just the kind of issues that I would run into as a kid and a teen were just really different from the kind of situations that they were being put in. And so, my parents worked really hard. We had a lot of difficulty making sure we could keep the lights on. A lot of times that we couldn't pay the rent and were being threatened with eviction. And so I just think that experience taught me that, you shouldn't have to sacrifice everything in your life. Like, I never got to see my dad as a kid because he was working days and night shifts, just to try to make sure we could stay in that nice neighborhood. And so I don't think you should have to do all that. I think you should be able to just get a quality education regardless of what zip code you were born in, and not have to deal with those kinds of struggles. And so that's been a really big push for me for why I've been involved in education movements, and why I've been really fighting for Black and immigrant communities. Especially since becoming a teacher. I've been, teaching for 10 years. I've been elected to the Baltimore Teachers Union for 3 terms as a building representative to fight on behalf of teachers and students and their rights in the city and for their families. And so, this was not something I had thought about doing. I never thought I was going to go into politics. I also didn't think I had the background or experiences to be able to do that. But folks in my community just started pushing me to consider it. And that's sort of how we got here today. So I had a lot of very strong opinions and convincing people in my life that, have really made me feel like this is something that we can win together, and hopefully do things that working families need in the city.
Yeah, so 3 things. Number one, totally agree with you that, depending on the zip code you're in, it kind of, in a lot of ways, decides your future, which I think is kind of gross. In terms of the school that you're sort of tied to just based on housing sales and this and that and the other. It has set up a very unfortunate system for a lot of people that just simply cannot get out of the place that they were born into, which is ridiculous because it flies in the face of everything that this country was supposedly founded on. Another thing is, I have found in my past that the more vocal and opinionated you are about what's going on in the place that you live and this and that, then the more informed you are and seem, people will start to suggest that run for public office. People in my past had suggested that I do it, but I honestly, and I think I've said it on the podcast before, my politics were different, and they probably didn't align necessarily with what Baltimore needs at that time or even now. But I think what you're going for, and I think I said this prior to us recording, is that if you're running on the Green Party ticket, there have been times where in districts and or for the mayoral race or something like that, it might have split the vote. But I think we're in a place right now where any given district, if you can manage to get out there and knock on doors and talk to enough people, you've got a fighting shot, because there are some people that are inhabiting these seats that are just there and they don't really engage with their constituents, and that's not a good look. And that's how someone like you can get outside and really drum up that interest. You just launched your campaign yesterday as we are recording, so I don't expect that you've been able to meet each and every person in the 12th district, but
We tried yesterday.
I was going to say, how did yesterday go?
Yeah, it was amazing. So I'm also a musician, so I teach full time, but like I said, I've always liked having a million jobs. And so I teach full time. I also am a musician. So I'm a guitarist and singer for the band Conjunto Bruja, and a dancer with a folkloric group called Naciones Unidas. And we dance like traditional uh, dance from Mexico and Peru and from other countries. So I
Send
have
me links to those things. I will put them in the show notes.
sweet. Yeah. If nothing else, this is the best thing that ever happened to me. So yeah, so I have this, these relationships with musicians around the city. And so in thinking about like, man, how are we going to launch this thing? Like we can't have it in an event or in a restaurant or anything because of COVID. And so, yeah, we decided to make it a bike tour around the 12th district.
Oh,
And
nice.
a friend of mine who is a landscaper, he generously offered his landscaping trailer to be our float. And so we put three different bands on there at three separate times and rolled through D12. And so we launched around, and it was really cool. I think a lot of us, not just the musicians, but people who enjoy arts and all that, we haven't been able to do that for months.
Right.
The live music scene has been crushed, and the art scene has been destroyed by COVID, at least like stuff that you could used to see in person. And so folks were super receptive around the district, really excited to hear the music, and I think really excited to also think about how politics could be done in a different way, in a way that reflects how awesome we are. Uh, we can do politics as usual, or we can do politics that's really powered by us and the people, and we bring so much to the table. So I think when we allow the community to take control of political movements, you get bicycle musical floats going through your district. So it was really cool. And we made stops in Charles Village, and at Douglas Homes, at the Oliver Rec Center. And so yeah, it was really great, and I'm so thankful to everybody that helped make that happen.
Yeah, I think the immediate thing that I would take notice of in terms of your campaign is A, youthful energy, B, not politics as usual, which in Baltimore is a big problem. We've been dealing with literally generations of the same thing over and over and over. And I don't care what letter is next to your affiliation. It's been very upsetting for me personally, who's lived in the city full time for 16 years, seeing there have been these moments, where we thought things would change, and then they didn't. I guess the most recent mayor being a prime example. But yeah, so you've already, said when people get involved, and I'm not so sure that anybody listening to this is entirely familiar with like what the Green Party platform entails. So educate us, please.
Absolutely. So you can definitely check out the platform. You can look at Baltimore Green Party online and see their full platform. But essentially, it's a platform that's really fighting for the rights of individual people, and not fighting on behalf of or supporting the needs of corporations and developers. So it's about having environmental justice, racial justice, economic justice. That's really the center of their entire platform, which is why, there's been a lot of correspondence between my politics and the politics that they bring to the table. So it was really a natural place for us to come together. And I think that's to what you're saying, like people are tired. Like I'm tired of having politicians whose campaigns and livelihoods are being basically funded and propelled by developers and companies that don't even live in the city, that take advantage of like our hard work and take advantage of making money in Baltimore City, and then all of those earnings get taken out, especially because of the pilots and TIFs, which
Ugh.
tax frameworks that make it so
Speaking
that
my language, baby.
I know, it's so crazy. Like we're giving these people amazing opportunities to take away huge hauls of cash, and
Yeah.
then they don't have to pay taxes. when, we can increase the minimum wage to a living wage. And that's something that from the jump is when I started really having, some issues with the incumbent, is that there was an opportunity in City Hall that we could have had a $15 minimum wage, and we were so close to having a veto proof majority for that. And he didn't sign on, and so the mayor vetoed it, and we don't have that $15 minimum wage. And I think, when we think about some of the issues that our city is facing, and, people talk a lot about the issues that we deal with around like thefts and crime and violent crime. Maybe if people were making money and didn't have to work 2-3 jobs to have a decent living, we would lower the crime rate a little bit, because people are in a desperate situation. So, I just think all this stuff is super, super entangled with one itself. And so we just got to find a new way to do these things.
Absolutely correct. Yes. I mean, obviously these tips and pilots, when you look at the largest employer in the city that probably doesn't pay minimum wage at 15 for a lot of their essential employees, as we're now designating them, maybe they ought to provide a little bit in terms of property tax wages. I'm not naming any, nonprofit corporations at this point, but I sure as shit will name the Harbor Point development, which took away a $170 million tax break and managed to subsequently erroneously link an enterprise zone for Perkins Homes, which is going to be demolished anyway at some point. And I do
slowly move them further and further away from the waterfront. So
yeah, or that. But I do think, honestly, a part of that is the financial and or otherwise ignorance on the part of the people that are on these committees and this and that. That
yeah,
they
and
they kind of rubber stamp it because all they see is jobs and that looks good, but they don't consider even an inkling of like, well, maybe we could take an additional 20 million in property taxes. Maybe we could make it work that way. The answer is always no, and they kind of take it from behind and say, okay, we'll make it work. All right. Don't leave. Please don't leave. They're never going to leave. They're going to do it because they want that money.
Exactly. And I think, so you do mention this nonprofit that owns like the majority of property in our city. And so I help out with organizing at Douglas Homes and helping them to fight for food access. And so I'm there frequently when they're doing their food drop-offs and donations, which like is a whole nother drama, where the housing authority was basically leaving public housing out to dry during COVID and weren't really taking care of people as they should have been. But what's really interesting to me is how many Hopkins employees come to get the food. Like this is like food for folks that are really struggling, like are having a hard time being able to make ends meet, and need support to get through, so they can keep their themselves and their kids and their families fed. And I cannot tell you how many times I see, like every single day, Hopkins employees that, like you said, and sometimes, the way they get away with it is because they're contract workers that they pay, minimum wages. And that's just not enough to live. But it doesn't have to be that way. There's way more of us that are in this circumstances where we are being paid those wages, or we are closely allied with the folks that are being paid those wages, and there are the folks that own these massive nonprofit industries or companies. So it makes sense to me that our democratically elected political officials should be taking care of us. Yeah.
What? That's not in their job description. Come on now.
Yeah.
What I do find fascinating is that Baltimore City has been run by the Democratic Party for God knows how long, and at all of a sudden, for the longest time, the Green Party was a third party that gets a small percentage of the vote, but their mission statement is always aligned with the progressive Democrats, more so than whoever is in the Democratic Party running the city right now, with a few exceptions. I mean, maybe more now than ever, really. But so looking at your opponent, which I will have to admit I don't know much about, because I guess this guy was essentially put into office, was selected to be the council person temporarily, which to is part of the twofold reason I think like you've got a really good shot, is that one, people want something different, but also two, this person hasn't been in office for that long and has to be elected. So having not much knowledge about who's in place, do you see, let's just say, like on a scale of 1 to 10, what's the amount of friction you think you might encounter in your campaign? Which at this point, we're getting down to it. You got about 3 months to really run
Yeah.
support.
Yeah, we are hitting the ground running for sure, which is why, we feel super excited that at launch we raised $17,000 in a little over 2 weeks.
Okay.
And since launching last night, we've already gone up to $18,000, so $1,000 in a day. And I haven't checked recently. So yeah. So, but it's been really cool. Like, I think people understand that we're facing a big fight, especially because of who is supporting this candidate financially, between developers, corporations, and also the FOP Union of Police.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, so about the incumbent, to answer your question, he has been around for 4 years, but he does benefit that his last name is Stokes, and the councilman that preceded him is also named Stokes, though they have no familial relation.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, a lot of people think it's the same person. So no, he has not been there forever. He's been there for 4 years. He did work in the former council person's office and was sort of, as you said, like personally selected to, like follow him as
Right.
the other person decided to run for council president.
Right.
And yeah, that's his situation. And he just really narrowly won the Democratic primary. So it was a super crowded race, and he won with 40% of the vote. So overwhelmingly, people wanted to choose somebody else. And the candidate that was the closest to unseating him, his name was Philip Westry. He was just short by 248 votes.
It is bonkers that in
I
Baltimore City,
know.
that's the margin of, basically the margin of error that can get you elected.
Yeah.
I was sitting on
So,
pins and needles throughout, watching the near miss with Sheila Dixon, and
yeah.
a good friend of the show, Bill Henry, who fist pump for him. Like he's a good dude. He was on the show a little while ago.
Oh, excellent. I'm a huge Bill Henry fan.
So
He's a
I was going to say, do you have any relationships with anybody that's already in office, like any backers that we should know about?
I mean, there's council people that I've worked with in my organizing work. I haven't solicited like a formal endorsement from anybody yet, but I've worked really closely with Councilman Zeke Cohen.
Okay.
He's a huge champion for education and students. And so when this whole COVID situation went down, and we saw that our kids were tremendously disconnected. Like,
Yeah.
we fired up the digital online classrooms and they were empty. And this is like kids who would never miss a day of class, right? So we knew that there was a tremendous problem going on. And so he's been a huge advocate for us from within the city council. And actually today, he just presented a resolution for the council, which is demanding that Comcast increase their internet speeds. Yeah, this is why I think I was having all these internet problems.
Yeah.
To increase their internet speeds for their low income package, which is called Internet Essentials, which is like essentially totally useless and adequate internet. You can't do video conferencing on it, which is like the most important thing that you need to be able to do with it during COVID. And also opening up residential hotspots. So they, really put out tons of press releases about how they opened public hotspots. But public hotspots means that our kids are taking their laptops and trying to work in a McDonald's parking lot to get
Yeah.
their homework done, which I don't think is a good idea by any standards, and definitely not a good idea for a kid to be trying to do their youth works job when it's 100-degree outside, in a public park. So we want them to to open up all their hotspots, which would include their residential hotspots, and to also make sure that their Internet Essentials package. Right now, when you sign up, you get to be in it for free for 60 days. We believe it should be free from the moment you sign up until 2 months after the full restoration of schools. And that's because we know families are going to need time to be able to recuperate all their lost salaries from this period of time. So we did have a small win in which the Internet Essentials free offer of even those 2 months was supposed to end at the end of June, and because of relentless social media advocacy, a ton of hits around the press around this issue, and starting to get involved with national organization leaders, we were able to get a win, and they extended that program all the way to the end of the year. But it's 6 months of free, completely inadequate internet. So, what they've done, we recognize it, but it's not what we need. It's not what we need if we expect students to be able to actually have a fair chance to be in school. And I'll just say like one last thing to close that sort of idea up, which is that when you look at the numbers for who can get connected and you look at old school redlining maps from like the 1930s, it is like this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So redline communities are the most disconnected communities. Over 70% of white residents in the city have stable broadline connection, or like stable fast internet connection. But if you're looking at the Black community, it's like 50%, and for the Latinx community, it's 46. So at the end of the day, you're looking at a situation where if we don't fix this internet crisis, we're resigning ourselves to 1 in every 2 Black and brown kids like not getting educated.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, no one in Baltimore City enjoys Comcast's sort of iron grip on the what should be a public utility, in my opinion. Um, and I think a lot of us are holding our breath for 5G to roll out. But I think that that map that you're referring to, which if you really want to just watch the best resource for illustrating that map, watch Rat Film. Came out a couple years ago. It's great. But yeah, I think what we're going to see is just the same old shit, happening again in those communities, that maybe a 5G broadband program would lift them out of that desert in terms of, we talk about deserts, food deserts, broadband deserts are certainly a thing. And, the only way to apply for jobs and blah, blah, blah is with the internet and
Unemployment.
but unfortunately, we again, going back to the sort of, and I use the Simpsons term, the crapulence of our leadership, is like several decades of not trying to come up with an alternative to Comcast. We've got like port networks. I was using Clear Wireless for a while, but they got acquired by Sprint, and now they're gone. And now Sprint's been rolled up into T-Mobile. So it's very, very, very hard for a city that just doesn't seem to have the political will to even recoup a portion of $170 million in tax breaks from a developer to go up against Comcast, which,
yeah.
I mean, if you're going to talk about, talking about antitrust and Elizabeth Warren type stuff, like, holy crap, they own Universal, NBC, yada, yada, yada. They own a lot of stuff. And sure, they could give, those less fortunate in the city of Baltimore essentially free broadband, but they're not going to do it.
Yeah. Especially when they're making so much money off of us. Like, they have an exclusive deal here. They make everything, as far as that market goes. And so it makes sense that a company that's making all of these profits off the COVID crisis, where people are having to be hyper reliant on not just internet, but like fast, high speed internet, should be able to, they should be able to do their fair share and do their work like everyone else is. City Hall is throwing down, the school district is throwing down, every school building has like released every single device that we have, So I don't think it's crazy, but I do think you're right. And that's why one of the platforms that we have is that we want to fight for having a plan to implement municipal Wi-Fi by 2026. 2026 is the franchise year agreement renewal for Comcast. And
Oh,
yeah, so I think we need to have another option on the table. And the thing is that people are doing amazing work right now to connect communities to internet. So there is the Project Waves that is through the Digital Harbor Foundation, and they are working with communities setting up internet that is much faster than the Internet Essentials package, giving it away for free, training folks through NPower, which is a organization that trains like Baltimore tech workers. And so, we could have something where we are ensuring that workers are being taken care of, that community has an active voice, and that is like the sufficient quality that we need. We just have to see it as a priority. Yeah.
yes. I mean, again, your youthful energy is shining through in the amount of words you've just used to describe a problem that we've had for like, I don't know, 20 years. So for sure, like, yeah, I'm on board. But what are some of the other, platform topics that you've got?
I think one of the most important ones that has to do with the defund the police movement that has, lit up across the country. And I think that's a big piece. It's like we need to be re-envisioning how we're going to address public safety. We've been trying to solve public safety with the same tools, only militarizing them more and more and more and creating more, spying infrastructure. But that has not resulted in us having like a higher crime clearance rate or lowering our homicide numbers. So I think reform around the BPD, they've had their chance, and now we need to think about what's a way that we can actually get to the root causes of crime. Like when we think about why do people commit crimes, how many times, like there was this horrible tragic incident where two women store owners over in the east side in Baltimore were killed in front of their kids, like they because someone was robbing their one was a corner store, and then there was another situation with a woman who had a beauty salon. They were stole like around $100 worth of money, you know
I
for
think one of
some.
the most tragic ideas, whatever. One of the most tragic realities that Baltimore is facing is that uh, in communities where the struggle is the highest, the value of human life is literally $100.
Yeah, but
It's it's sick and sad, and yeah. So I haven't really voiced my opinion when it comes to the defund the police movement, but I do have one idea.
tell me.
Okay, all right. Police budget's what, $1 billion? I don't know. What is it? It's huge.
Yeah.
We can take $200 million, reallocate a vast portion, say 80 million, toward social services, this and that. And the other. The way that the city leadership needs to spin it to all the rich whiteys that are complaining about their property taxes is say, we'll give you a nickel off your property taxes. Eh? Eh? They'd be there because it's helping my wallet out.
Hmm.
But I also had another idea, and I've been formulating this in my head over the past, I don't know, few years. One of them is about housing for police officers in the city, so that we can foster a community of officer friendlies that belong on patrolling the beat. I mean, I've talked about it so many times, I'm not going to really bring it up again. But another idea I had, and maybe you can take this with you, I'm just putting it on the table, is we set up a paltry amount of money out of the city budget, say $1 million, and you as a citizen go online, and there are a number of efforts that you can participate in terms of volunteering, but it's really not, because what I'm about to say is you do 15 hours of community service for X, Y, or Z. You then get a whatever hour per credit toward paying your city bills. So street cleanups, mentoring, this and that and the other, whatever that dollar amount is per hour that the city deems worthy. The budget has been set at a maximum of $1 million.
Yeah.
Consider the amount of hours that people might actually, look, let's be honest, the participation rate would be 50% or lower. However, you would get multiple thousands of hours of people volunteering and actually doing good work in the communities. It's kind
Yeah.
of gross that, you have to incentivize it in that way, but I think people would bite. I'm not so sure. What do you
Yeah. And I don't think that's gross at all. I think, I think a lot of people in the community wish they could do more. They already volunteer a ton, but because of how low their salaries are and their wages are, they're kind of, their hands are tied for how much that they can really give to the community. And people give a lot,
They
despite
do.
the fact that they may be struggling economically. And so I think, yeah, the idea of supporting folks like doing community work and, you know, uh, I wouldn't even call it necessarily as an incentive, but like honoring that hard like community work that they do, especially in areas where like maybe it's not as sexy, like helping with community cleanup and things like that. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting idea for sure.
I would even say that there are like the least sexy of tasks, such as like digitizing documents in city offices and things like that. If you can make it worth a person's while in terms of,
Yeah,
hey, we will give you a per hour credit of $15 off of your property tax bill for somebody who's going to be affected vastly more, who's maybe a low wage earner, that would make such a difference in their life.
yeah,
And certainly it would just be flat across the board, the same benefit for anybody that wants to do it. Take it to the bank, baby.
excellent.
So next time I have Bill Henry on the show, we'll discuss it. But as for you, thank you so much for coming on. Do you have any links that you would like to give to us so that we can follow you along and
Yeah.
coming?
Yeah, definitely. So people can check out francaforthepeople.com and
Mm.
learn more about the issues that we're fighting for and sign up to volunteer with the campaign. You can also look there for donation information. So like we discussed earlier, we're fighting a campaign that is trying to battle against developer and corporate money. So we definitely need the support of people to be able to get to our win in November. But yeah, no, thank you so much, Evan, for having me on. It's really exciting to be here and to see you again after all the years post sausage,
Only been what, 6 years? I don't even know.
I don't know. There's like a time warp. I don't understand time ever since like the COVID crisis began.
Oh,
So
tell me about it. But yeah, I mean, certainly you are extremely well versed in the ways of local politics and have a lot more going on. And I think if you, I'm sorry, when you do win, we will have you back on. And I wish you the absolute best in this race.
yes. Well, thank you.
Mess.
Well, thank you so much. It was great to be here.
All right. All right. That has been our interview with Franca. Thank you so much for your time. We will be right back with the rest of the show.
Sweet. And my internet didn't cut out the whole time.
Yeah, we got